Welcome back to Tools of the Humans. This is Season 2, Episode 1. Episode 1 was recorded last year together with a special co-host, Matteo Basei Fantolino. For those who don't know Matteo is a high-performance coach, he has a master in digital technology transformation, he's an entrepreneur, he's an investor. And Matteo came to me last year and he said, I have a coach executive advisory session with Jim Cook. Why don't we bring him into the show? And I said, well, this is not really my line of business. Definitely this is yours. But Matteo had a great idea. He said, we don't have to ask specifics. We need to ask him about Bill Campbell. We need to ask about culture in companies in Silicon Valley. We need to ask him about coaching. So our chat lasted for almost 2 hours and we had to divide it into 2 parts. This is part 1. I am TC and I will be co-hosting the episode with Matteo Basei Fantolino. When I started the podcast, I was thinking about Tools of the Humans because everybody has a story to tell. Everybody is using his own tools. But it's not only the tools of the people like you are going to speak about what you've been using, but also about the tools that you received from Bill Campbell. Every time I'm interviewing people and in the podcast saying, okay, this is about knowledge, okay? It's knowledge not only if you're talking about, but it's also knowledge when you're listening to people. So we are, our radar is open to listen what you have to say.
My story in Silicon Valley started in the early 90s at Intuit primarily. Was one of my first, I was working at a defense contractor for 2 years before that, but my first real Silicon Valley company was Intuit, 100-person company. I was the first finance person hired. I was 25 years old in 91. And Bill Campbell wasn't there yet, but we were just a one product company. And that one product company was Quicken. And we were on, it was still shipping it on floppy disks and 3.5-inch disks. That's how far back it goes. I won't get into a lot of details, but that company experienced a ton of growth. And it was all the lessons that I've learned over the 5.5 years, almost 6 years that I spent it Intuit. I knew I was learning some very valuable lessons. And I was at the right age and stage to just absorb them all. And I've always had a brain of, I only want to learn a lesson once. And then I want to, and because I know I'm going to apply, and I knew I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. The company went public in 93. They, we were a small company. And so I got the IPO filing document, the S1, thrown at me and said, okay, you need to go manage how to get this thing written with the lawyers and with the bankers. And that's just how we operated. The CFO was off coding Quicken for Windows because he knew how to code. Scott was off, building the company. I could do things like help write the S1 with the bankers. And so I met a lot of great people, Morgan Stanley, and I got exposed to a lot of people very quickly and a lot of techniques. And I wanted to keep those best of lessons and pass them along. But Bill Campbell came in. So we IPO'd in 93, went through a lot of different M&As. But Bill Campbell was Intuit's first CEO. You probably know this, right? So Scott Cook handed over the reins to Bill Campbell in 94. And that's when a CEO founder hands over the reins to another CEO, it's a difficult transition. It always has been. I've watched this transition, right? It's difficult for a founder to give up control. But Bill came in and he wasn't, and you've studied Bill Campbell. Many people have studied Bill Campbell who know him. He is not your typical CEO. He really is, as the book properly, $1 Trillion Coach properly suggests, he really is more of a coach than he is a CEO. That's, the $1 Trillion Coach. But if you think about a coach, what is a coach? It's a leader of a team. What is a CEO? It's a leader of a team. So he brought this leadership style, this of almost business. Sports is a business, business is a sport. Why can't business be a sport? A football team's a sport. And so he always would approach it. And then when you're a leader of a team, uh, teams win or lose because of what? Because of the people and how well the people work together. So I think what makes it sounds so obvious to people looking back, but what made Bill so successful was his ability to relate to people in a very authentic way. And he would always put people first, and he really enjoyed younger people. So he took me under his wings. I was 25. He was, I think, probably at the time 50, just turning 50. But he enjoyed the younger generation. He took several of the younger, up and comers up under his wings.
We can talk about Intuit, because in Europe we don't know that much Intuit. Maybe who was the founder?
Oh, sure.
And I understand that Bill Campbell comes after as a second CEO, right? And so,
Yeah.
what brings Bill Campbell from a football or sports coach to become a CEO of an investment company? So this is something I lose from the book.
So Scott Cook was
Okay.
the founder and creator of Quicken with a guy named Tom Prue. He met
Okay.
Tom at Stanford. He started
Okay.
he tells this Scott Cook famously tells this story in which he decided to want to create a piece of personal finance software, but he was a marketing person from Procter and Gamble from Cincinnati. That's where he got his he's a sales and marketing person, product manager. And he had no idea how to code, so he walked Stanford's campus and was putting up flyers looking for an engineer to help him code Quicken in 1984.
Yeah.
A piece of software. It's a personal finance software. It was
Okay.
it was a number 40th. It was probably the 40th personal finance software attempt in the market. And I'll come back to that, why that's important. But he just wanted to do it better because he felt that personal finance software was broken. And so he walked Stanford and he found his co-founder, Tom Prue, who was an engineering student, who helped him put up the flyers. And as they were talking, Scott convinced him to help code Quicken. So Tom coded Quicken. He was the co-founder. Scott actually created the company. And for 7 years, 5 to 7 years, they tried to get it off the ground. The Macintosh computers came out in the 80s, and everybody wanted to build software. And so he was just trying to build a piece of software that would balance your personal checkbook.
Okay.
So in the old days, there was a checkbook, and you would actually handwrite a check, and you would handwrite it in your register and in your checkbook register. And that's how you balanced your checkbook. And you get a paper statement from your bank, and you'd have to reconcile the checks that you wrote because there was no electronic banking. Everything was check-based.
Okay.
And so he created a piece of software where you could just send checks without having to write checks. The computer can record the checks for you. The computer could balance your checkbook for you. There was no such thing as internet. There was no such thing as e-commerce. It was just a bank and a checkbook and a piece of software on a computer. Why are we doing this by hand? Why can't a computer write checks and send checks, or at least print the checks for us? And so it was the first real kind of personal finance software for homes.
Yeah.
And it was, it was not the Intuit that you know today, which is subsequently become QuickBooks. QuickBooks is the accounting software that does double entry accounting. Quicken was just writing checks and balancing your checkbook. QuickBooks was the first real, we're going to do all the accounting in the back end for you. And then TurboTax was a company that we purchased in 94 that did personal tax, file your taxes with the IRS. And then they got into e-commerce and online banking and so on, so on and so forth. But at the time, Intuit when I joined, it was a $19 million USD revenue company, under $20 million. It was selling maybe 100,000, pieces of software a year and then selling supplies and checks to go along with it. So no venture capitalist would give Scott or Tom money for 5 or 6 years because they said that this has been done before and tried before and it's all failed.
Okay.
But here's what's interesting about Scott's approach, which is a great startup lesson. Scott was a customer comes first. It's all about the customer. product marketing manager from Procter and Gamble, big company. He was the first person to bring this. We have to be super close to the customer and build our software to the customer's needs, not just build software that engineers think is going
to, right?
Quicken was the first product that made the check look like an actual check on the screen, on the computer screen. And the checkbook register, you might even not even know what a checkbook register is, but back then, right? But the checkbook register looks like the checkbook register on the screen. Every other piece of software approached it like it was just an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And right, it was like computerish, right?
Yeah.
But he's like, no, make the check look like a check on the screen, and then fill in, don't handwrite the check, put $10 in the field, and the computer will write out $10.00, store the name, because you're going to write checks to the same people all the time, to your cleaning people, like whatever. And it's like, and so I can write checks easier. And so he just brought an ease of use, into it was all about fast. And Scott would hold up a pencil in every single employee new hire orientation when he told a story, and every single all hands meetings, all company meetings, and said, our competition is not the other 40 people in this market building software. Our competition is this pencil. We have to be faster than this pencil and easier than this pencil. If our computer is not, remember, people weren't familiar with using computers as much back then.
Yeah.
And the concept of personal finance on a computer is awesome. Let me buy this software. Let me buy this spreadsheet. People are still learning how to use a computer. But if it's not faster and easier than a pencil, then they're just wasting their time. And so it was the challenge of, don't be better than the competition, be better and faster and easier than the pencil.
Wow.
That's Scott Cook. That's how Scott started, to give you a sense of who he is. Customer comes first. Everything's about the customer. Bill Campbell is all about the team. And in order to grow a company, he was all about, it's the people, it's the team, it's leadership, it's getting the best out of people, it's coaching them up, it's teaching them, training them, helping them be their best through a set of leadership values, operating principles. Like any great coach of any great sports teams, there was just a fundamental, you have to operate this way, and we have to act this way, and we have to win as a team, lose as a team. And Bill was all about these principles that have been written in this book.
You were talking about startup, and nowadays we see so many hubs, so many incubators for startups for young people. And especially Dubai is a big hub for startups, tech startups, and investment and everything. But probably they are too young, so they are missing this kind of blend that you lived at the moment that the Bill came to the party, because effectively, you said he liked to work with the young people. So what was that you had at that time to gain his trust, or was it just his attitude that he valued what you were able to do?
So Bill was highly networked. He had worked at Apple. He had worked at a division called Claris that Apple had purchased. So he had come up through he used to be a football coach at Columbia University, and he was a football coach, and then he also had his MBA, and he stopped being a football coach and started being an executive at, I think, Kodak or something else. Yeah. And then he worked his way up to Silicon Valley with Claris and worked his way up to being a CEO, just because he had this leadership presence and he had this ability to build great teams. And so by the time that Scott was looking for a founder, John Doerr, the venture capitalist that helped fund Intuit, introduced Bill to Scott and said, I think Bill would be a great person to help, scale this team, because it was a very small team at the time. When Bill came in, I think we were about 400 employees, still relatively small. So we had gone through that stage of everyone knew how to do it together as a small team. And now when you're operating as a 400-person company, and this is one of the lessons I continue to teach my clients and try to pass on the lessons, you have to operate differently as a 400-person company or even a 150-person company than you did at 50 people or 100 people. You have to operate differently again at 700 people and 1,000 people, and then you have to operate differently again. And You have to bring different rhythms and lessons and rigors and consistency to the game. You can't just keep making it up, right? And so it's the difference between playing a high school sport versus playing a college sport versus playing a pro sport. It's still the same sport, but if you don't have your fundamentals and your foundations down, you're never going to make it to the next level. And so Bill was brought in and knew how to play the next level where Scott didn't. Bill had been running a division for Apple, and so it was the perfect blend of a 400-person company. He loved the concept. He loved the company, and he loved the culture, right? So Bill's very much of a culture person. It was all about culture for him. And Intuit had built, to Scott's credit and to the company's credit, a great culture where people were respected. And this is still not something that Bill leads with. It's the people first, culture, teams win. And there's still a lot of companies out there that believe technology wins or product wins. And that is true. But but cultures win. There are still very few great companies that have been born in Silicon Valley that are renowned for having great cultures. Intuit is one of them. Netflix is one of them, right? Mozilla is one of them. But there are many that don't have good cultures. And I won't name them here in case this gets broadcast, but you know who those companies are. You've heard the companies with not so great cultures. And that's more predominant that and it's not because they don't want to have a great culture, it's because they don't invest in the culture. They don't come at it with the attitude that we don't have all the answers, but if our people are playing together and playing as a team and working together, we'll all figure it out together, that together we can figure it out. We'll have to, much like a fighter pilot or, we don't know what the battles, the best laid plans as Eisenhower, others said, like the best laid plans go out the window the minute the war starts, the minute the shooting starts. But you have to react in the moment, and you can only react if you trust the people in your team around you. And that's why very few companies make it, right?
That's really a great value. I mean, I think that leaders, they can be leader without being coached, and then you don't create a legacy. Like I've lived it in my Air Force. Yeah, we are great leaders. Okay, let's go. But then they were not coaching, so there was no legacy. There was no long-term vision. And when you create a team that has the same intent and same purpose, then at the point you can share that attitude. I think when you were talking about Intuit and trying to fight the pencil, I think I could see something that you did also with Netflix, trying to fight Post, which was not the enemy, but I remember you were telling about the story of trying to get against time and trying to get this service up and running.
Yep. I mean, with Netflix, it was really, all these companies, if you look at where most companies are successful, it comes from a storytelling place, in my opinion. It comes from people sitting around the dinner table saying, you've got to use this personal finance software because it's just faster and easier than balancing your checkbook. Or they're sitting around the dinner table or at a bar and they're saying, have you tried this Netflix service? The disc just comes to you in your mailbox. You don't have to go to the video store and drive and go get a movie. You can just tell you tell your computer and it'll ship it to you. Oh, this will never work. Yeah, that's crazy. But people would tell each other and they try it, and then other people would tell each other. So it's around these storytellings. With Netflix, it was around no late fees. Back in the mid 90s, right? Netflix was the first DVD rental. Mateo, you're still probably too young to understand this as well. But DVDs on a disc, on a plastic disc. You'd watch movies on a disc. And before that, it was a big, gigantic VHS tape.
Yeah, which I remember
the museums. Yeah, and you had to actually rewind the tape to start it at the beginning, right? There was a rewind button, right? And so Blockbuster built 25 years of a video rental business, a $5 billion public company business, by just renting DVDs with retail stores that people would have to drive into, try to find a movie for the night, walk out, pay $3 or $4 and go rent a movie and then return it. And people are lazy, and it's the return which was the big painful moment, because if you didn't return it the next day, you got another $4 fee. And if you didn't return it the next day, you got another $4 fee, right? And I was busy and I forgot, and it was sitting on my desk, and I forgot to drive it, the 5 miles to the Blockbuster store and return it. And so these late fees, what were called late fees, were the really painful thing that Netflix rallied around and said, just no late fees. We will not charge you a late fee. Just, we'll ship you a disc, keep it as long as you want, and we'll ship you the next one when you return it. And it's got to be easier than Pestle, no late fees. For Mozilla Firefox, it was faster, way faster than Internet Explorer. It was easier to use. It was the first product with tabbed browsing. Like, every other, by 2005, Microsoft had taken over the internet browser space. 98% market share of the Big Blue E internet browser. Microsoft owned it. They had taken all their developers off of it. But every time you opened a window in 2005 on your computer, because it was a Windows browser, a new window would open. New tab, new window. I mean, tab browsing wasn't even a thing until Firefox said, how about we just put tabs on one window? And you can go tab to tab. I don't want all these windows all over my screen. It's just little stuff like this that creates big inflections of companies. Faster tab browsing, and it wasn't part of the operating system, and it was more secure. So we launched Firefox on faster, more secure tab browsing. We launched Netflix on no late fees and subscriptions. We launched, Quicken on what is it for your company that is really the rallying cry. And if you really think about it, it comes back to what the customers really want. What is it that customers really want at the end of the day?
What was the limit when you with Netflix? I mean, like logistics, technology, and then with Firefox, probably not more technology, but other things. What were the limits at the point that you had to overcome?
What are the obstacles?
Yeah.
Well, number one was awareness, right? That the service even existed. We started Netflix on $2 million of capital, and our first round after that was $6 million. It wasn't a lot of money, right? We were in a new industry. The DVD disc the first DVD players had literally just come out in 1997. And nobody even had a DVD player. So one of the first obstacles was, do people even have DVD players to play the discs on? Second obstacle was, there was 100,000 VHS titles out there that you could rent available because every movie was on tape. But there was only 500 titles that those movie studios were willing to actually spend the money on to put on this new format called DVD, because it had, 480 lines of resolution versus the VHS tapes 160 lines of resolution. We now know this is 480p or 1080p of TV sets, but a DVD was basically 480p, but it was 4 times the resolution of a VHS tape. And it just looked better, and the colors were great. And so now they took all these back studio films, Singing in the Rain and Sound of Music, and they started taking all these and like, on DVD this thing would be great. And they made it a collector's item, right? They made it as a sell-through. They wanted to sell movies to own them. They'd never thought about rentals. We created the rental market. DVDs were created as we want you to own the movie. Hollywood created this as we want to be a collector's item, like a bottle of wine. Your favorite movie, you can have it on disc and you can own it forever. And it's sold at $29, $39, $49 for the disc. Whereas it was actually more like $25, $29 to own a DVD movie. And Hollywood viewed it as just more income. They had no concept of this was going to be a rental. The rental market was all around, the movie studio industry was all around, put the movie in a movie theater, and we'll just happen to then give the rights to make VHS tapes out of it to get other income out of our movie downstream. But DVDs were never thought about as a rental medium. Only Netflix thought about that, right? it was always a collector's item media. But the problem, back to your obstacles, is that there was only 500 movies and 1,000 movies, and there were only a certain number of hardware players. So we had to have a certain mass of hardware players under the Christmas tree, and people only bought these hardware players cost 4 or 5, actually at the time, $1,000, $1,000 to own a DVD player, which in 1997 terms was a lot of money.
Yeah. I was in the States in those years, and I remember this revolution of DVDs and stuff. And I bought 2 DVDs for my family in Italy. Imagine that. And when I came home, I was like, first of all, you cannot play because it's a different region. And second, we didn't have a DVD player. So it has been there with the books for it's still there. There are a couple of DVDs that I bought at that time. But it was just, as you said, it was like the collective at that point. Then after that, it went. I think you had also another obstacle there that you faced with your cartridge printer, ink cartridge. You were telling in a story. I heard about this. It's so funny.
There's lots of obstacles. I mean, if you really want to go deep, there's many books that, there's a book called Netflixed, which was written by Gina Keating. There's a book that Mark just wrote, Mark Randolph, the CEO, that will never work. And there's even a documentary called Netflix versus the World on Amazon Prime. But there's lots of these stories. But all these companies have look, too many orders came in on the first day when we opened the site, and we were just a scrappy little company that had to print out labels and take these labels on a label printer and attach the label to an envelope to ship the envelope out. We were we were shipping discs in the mail, and we had to, the best way to do it is use a computer with labels, and the printer just broke and jammed. We only had, we had to go find another printer. We didn't think we'd get 500 to 1,000 orders the first day, but we got 1,000 orders in the first hour, right? The printer can't print 1,000 orders an hour, even 1,000 orders, printer speed. No, we need a faster printer. Just little stuff like this, tiny stuff.
Yeah, awareness, but also the world was receptive in the moment, right?
Yeah.
For the business.
Well, it took to give you a stat. It took the DVD hardware player. Forget about the software, the disc that goes in it that we were renting or people were buying, but the hardware player took 7 years to overcome the VHS hardware player. It took 7 years from 1997 to 2004 for 51% of U.S. households to have a DVD player in their living room. And it was the fastest consumer electronics device in the history of consumer electronics devices. 7 years is the fastest, at the time, the fastest hardware. And it takes longer for startups to get going because people think that these things are going to change overnight. But 7 years from 1997 to 2004 is the fastest consumer electronics device adoption by any U.S. household. That's how popular it was. But as popular as it was, it still took 7 years to become popular.
Yeah. And then Netflix moved to sell just subscription on website, only software. So yeah. How many years takes to change, to switch to this new business model, let's say?
That was a year and a half in. So we were just trying to become, we started Netflix in 97. We launched the site in 98. We were trying to become the biggest Blockbuster store. Our first milestone, and I'll answer your question in a minute, was simply to be bigger than the biggest of the 6,000 Blockbuster video stores. We wanted to have more revenue than the largest Blockbuster store, which we had access to the data because they were a public company. And there was a whole history of video software dealers. And so we hit that goal. We were just shipping discs. But then we realized what we had was people kept telling us, like, we built for the customer on backwards from a customer first attitude. They knew what they wanted to watch next. They didn't want to have to go to Blockbuster to get a movie. Once I watched this, and we were talking to our customers all the time, I want to watch this. And so we were the first ones to create a list. We were the first company to create a list. We're going to call it a list for now because it's not a subscription yet. but we built a what do you want to watch next list on the website in their account, and they would list the 10 movies that they wanted shipped to them next. After I ship this one back, ship this one to me. After I ship this one back, ship this one to me. So that's what we built the list first as an operational convenience to get movies in the hands of these people faster, because they knew what they wanted to watch, but they only had time to watch one movie at a time. And from that list came well, if you got this list and you want to watch all these movies, why don't we just charge you the first subscription service? We were also the first subscription service in e-commerce. And we started charging a monthly fee.
Still with the hardware. You were delivering the CDs.
Yeah. Please keep in mind that from 1997 to 2009, Netflix was a DVD hardware shipping only company.
Oh, 2009. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Netflix did not enter streaming until about I might have my dates wrong, but until about 2009. And streaming was only an experiment. Netflix went public on DVD hardware shipping envelopes in the mail, and that lasted for 12 years before they said, we probably should get into this thing called streaming. It was always on the roadmap as an ability to do it. It was just too expensive.
Okay.
When we actually thought, the future of this company is going to be deliver these movies over the internet. Of course it is.
Yeah.
But we did the math, and the bandwidth of internet bandwidth was just too expensive. But a T1 line back then was $200 US dollars a month to get 1.5 megabits per second. And that was way faster than their 28.8K modem or their 56.6 modem. Tommaso remembers all this. Like, I've got a 100K modem.
Yes.
And you would pay $200 a month to get 1.5 megabits per second, which now we think about that in terms of, wait, I'm not getting 100 megabits per second. I'm not getting a gigabit per second on my, and here's the problem. When you've only got that kind of bandwidth, 4.8 gigabytes of a movie streaming over the internet, you can't do it. Okay. It's prohibitively expensive. And so the obstacle, back to your obstacles, Tommaso, is people still had dial-up modems. They didn't have hardware players in their living rooms. Streaming was a concept, but it was not a reality. You could actually put as many CDs. The cost of streaming one DVD, I say CDs because they're a CD platform. The cost of streaming one DVD in 2002 or 3, even later, over the internet, would be the equivalent of filling a station wagon. We said this a lot: station wagon full of DVDs and driving it across the U.S. And delivering to people and back. It would cost the same.
But you knew that was happening, and you knew that sooner or later these obstacles will be overcome. Did you have a vision for that? I mean, like, as you said, streaming is costing too much, because sometimes we look inside and said, oh, technology did a lot. We improved so many things, but at that time when you're living it, you don't know what's next. I mean, like, you might have an intuition, but still, what were the sensor that you had that the technology would help, and finally you would be able to go in that direction?
Well, great companies always have. We did have it on in our vision that someday this was going to happen, but this vision that someday it's going to happen has to meet with the reality of today, plus what customers can accept. We've seen these lessons play out time and time again over the course of technology and Silicon Valley history of, like, first had to come the mainframe computer, then had to come the personal computer, and then had to come an easier personal computer, the Mac, and then there had to come software that people could use on the computer, and then had to come, this thing called the internet, where I can actually have a central location to come to and not have to just be stuck on my piece of hardware, and I could talk to people on this thing called the internet through a browser. And these are the evolutions of technology. And then from the browser, it was like, we had to actually create social media, and then the browsers were still computer to computer. And so now let's put everything in the cloud. And now that everything is in the cloud, it's a lot easier to, you don't have to have all these computers on your desk or inside your premises. And so these things always evolve, right? And now we're talking AI, which is just another form of automated software. AI is just automated software, right? And so it takes time for the and you can't skip steps. You can't get, it takes time to get people used to going from an abacus, just use another analogy, like an abacus to a slide ruler, to a calculator, to a computer doing your math. You just can't go from an abacus to a computer overnight, because it just won't be adopted that fast. As smart as people in Silicon Valley are and technologists and they have to slow down and meet people where they are.
Yeah, but what the difference about a culture in Blockbuster in Netflix? I feel like in my knowledge, I like a book of Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. So it seems like you were move forward, move from a passion, from a why, but always looking to an infinite game. And instead of Blockbuster, it was like, the bookstores before Amazon. So they've been just this.
No, I think that's right. I think whether you're talking the infinite game or any of the successes, I'm a firm believer that meet the customers where they are and evolve them with you. Give them something, give them another, what Scott Cook would call a wow moment. Give them another, aha, this is great. Give them another reason to tell stories around the dinner table about, Netflix just launched this feature, or Mozilla just launched, oh my God, this is great. They just added this. And so bring the customers along with you, right? And but in order to do that, you have to be super close to the customers and not be too far ahead of them. Too many technology companies get so far ahead of their customers. They throw so many features, and you can do this, and here's a bell and whistle, and you can do that. By the time you know it, right, you're throwing so many features at a customer because it's possible to throw features at a customer, and the customer gets confused, doesn't know where to start. Customers just want to evolve with you slowly and adopt it with you, and they're very loyal to you. If you give them too much too fast, well, and you can do streaming, and here's what you need to do streaming. You would need to go buy an ISDN line, and you need to set up this computer that goes faster. It's like, by the time, it's like, people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But when it was ready, they did. When they said, oh, this actually works, it's not glitchy, it's actually a better experience than watching a movie. See, for the longest time, for 4 years after the streaming experiment started in 2009, it wasn't a great experience. It was difficult. It was glitchy. It was buffery. It was all the things. They didn't have the selection of movies. Great, I want to stream this, but I don't even have a computer that's fast enough to stream it on, or it just is jerky, or the resolution wasn't good. It's like, you know what? That DVD is a lot easier to put in the machine and just press play. Good, now I can watch a movie. I don't want to have to work. I don't have to work at watching my movie. I just want to relax. I don't have to be a technologist to watch a movie. And so you have to strip away all of the technology and just make it easier for people. And once you achieve that ease of use, that's when products take off, through ease of use. And ease of use comes from being extremely close to a customer, period.
I could give you a parallel also for building airplanes.
Yeah.
Fighter airplanes. Yeah. When there is too much engineering, then the pilot goes there, is like, who drew this? You find the ergonomics, like a pilot wouldn't do that. After many years, you have that feeling that when you sit on the chair of the airplane, you're like, who designed this? And then it comes out, oh, yeah, so this was an engineering challenge to make the most complicated system. And then if it worked, you win.
And unfortunately, on your example, Boeing actually messed it up so badly that the computer was flying the plane, confusing the pilots, right? And it was a safety issue, so it wouldn't crash. But then the pilots would have to take over, and they would push the yoke in the opposite direction, because the plane should not be doing this.
You're talking about 737, right?
Yeah. Like the pilots would fight against the plane, because that's not how a human would fly a plane. Even though it was, anyway, you know more about this than I do, but it caused actually some fatal accidents.
This is end of part 1 of episode 1, season 2. Coach Executive Advisory with Jim Cook. Stay tuned for the rest.